midterm elections across the country. What are we going to see? Are we going to see just straight up those congressional districts that are historically Republican will stay Republican? Are we going to see the House swing back violently to the Democrats? Is the Senate going to be in play? Are we going to see disruption and surprises? Jim?
He's looking at you.
Jim, I'm looking at you.
I was looking down.
Jim, just understand, Jim has more data than in that little black book is all the national polling
You give me
right
too
there.
much credit, but
He's got all the algorithms.
That's right.
the truth is I don't know, but since I'm supposed to, if I were a betting man, I would bet that the Democrats take control of the House.
Big, little margin, 50 seats.
I don't know. I mean, here's why. I think now, I think there has been if you believe polling, there's been an uptick. I read that CLF, which is run by Corey Bliss, who's a very capable gentleman. This is the Republican House outside game. They did a survey of 50 districts, where Hillary, the swing districts, and I guess the generic went from +11 Dem to +3. I just read that a couple of days ago. But I believe that every actual data point so far has basically said trouble. All the congressional races, the special elections, these races for judges in Wisconsin. I was stunned. Everybody talked about Ed Gillespie, losing by more than he should. But the real story was that in the state legislature, remember, it was like a tie. It was like they had to literally flip a coin to see. So I mean, they lost like 14 seats in down races. So I think the Democrats have had an excellent recruiting year. I think they have focused on, I mentioned earlier, the military. They've gone way out of their way to recruit female candidates with military backgrounds.
And rather moderate, a lot of them.
They're trying where they
trying,
can, but they're not going to get them all through the primaries, right? The parties. So, and I think that what I said earlier, I just don't see the types of extra people who voted for Trump that elected him, in Pennsylvania and that stuff. They are, I don't care if Trump says it, they're just not going to be like, hey, we need to keep control. They're against the establishment.
Right.
Okay, so I don't think they're going to vote. I think women are going to vote in large numbers. I think the Democrat base, the more liberal base, is highly energized. I think they're going to have a ton of money. And so I think it goes. I think it goes that way.
And the Senate?
I'm less certain about that because that tends to be more, focus. I mean, I know like Tennessee's a problem, but I think Manchin, so that could go either way. I'm not as sure about that.
Mike Sheehan,
Mathematically, the Republicans are in much better position.
Yeah. I
Mike
think
Sheehan,
that's right.
you know Charlie Baker. I do. Yeah. Know him well. And an aberration or the future of successful American politics?
Well, I think he's a model for what can happen. I mean, he's
approval rating at about 78%.
Highest in the country, has been from day one.
Most popular governor in the country.
Yep.
Yeah,
but he does his job. He doesn't get sucked into drama, or he does his job. He's extremely likable because he is likable. He's not faking. He can only be one person. Brilliant guy. Knows where to pick his fights. Knows where to back off, and he'll get reelected easily. And I think he should be the model. He's moderate. He's fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and I think that's what the Republican Party should be looking.
Bob Whitcomb?
More Charlie Bakers.
More Charlie Bakers.
Can we talk a little bit about the gubernatorial?
Yeah, that's where we're going to go.
Okay.
Here in Rhode Island?
Yeah, here.
Yeah,
here in Rhode
absolutely.
Island.
We were going to
'Cause
go to
we
Bob
have a
Whitcomb and then
candidate
back
over
to
here.
you.
Okay.
Bob, Gina Raimondo, how can she be? It's 4% unemployment. It's cranes.
I think she'll.
What was it when she was elected?
42.
Yeah,
42.
What was unemployment when she was elected? It was pretty high.
7, 8,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. So highest level of Rhode Islanders employed.
Yep.
Right.
Record right now, but stuck at a
Well,
dismal
yeah, I mean,
number
she's
on-
got her own problems. She's not particularly good on television. That's part of it. In person, if you're, sitting having a cup of coffee with her, she's very engaged. She can be quite engaging. Doesn't come across very well on television. That will hurt her. Also, you've got just the Rhode Island problem we've had for a long time of deep mistrust of everyone in all institutions, and whoever the governor is apt to be unpopular. And they tend to assign to the governor in the state powers of evil and good, which exceed the powers of the office.
beyond the constitutional
You bet,
description.
yeah, if the economy, the economy is really bad, they blame. This is true in every state, but I think maybe particularly more so here, and it's good. The economy now is pretty good, but her presentation, her theatricality isn't very good. And there's so much still mistrust left over from our endless scandals. Everybody out here may have heard of 38 Studios, for example. So they think, you can see this now in the debate about the Paw Sox, which I was up at a breakfast a few weeks ago in Boston with the Red Sox people, and they're sort of bemused. Why does everyone here think that everyone is a liar and a thief? I said, well, that's about 400 years of history. So she's got her burden is sort of the weight of history and scandals, and not being a particularly good presenter.
Kate Nagel, you cover the governor quite a bit. Sometimes she's on GoLocal Live with you. She's very relaxed. Other times you jump her in the parking lot at press conferences and chase her down on this issue or that issue. What's her problem with communication?
Just back to Bob's point a little bit, I think she's got a lot of numbers that are just immovable. There's just folks who are never going to turn over to that side. She's not going to win anybody over.
Sexism too. I think that is an element.
I totally agree with Bob, and you see it all the time. So she's not going to sway people. She's not going to move people. But I think the election here in 18, we've got one gubernatorial candidate sitting behind us here. It's going to be very interesting to see sort of, the referendum on 16. Joe Trillo, the campaign chair here for Donald Trump, and of course the Democratic primary. Can Matt Brown really run on the Bernie Sanders, bona fides? And we've, totally done some pieces on his background as well. So I don't think this is going to be 2016 redux. Between the independents, and we thought that Matt Brown might go as an independent. There's a whole other set of circumstances that, I don't know if I was sitting here to be a betting person what it looks like to play out to be from it, but a press standpoint, it's inherently fascinating, right? We always kind of say the more the merrier. We want different vantage points and viewpoints in the race, but to see can sort of that Bernie-crat or purported Bernie-crat, put forth a true challenge to her is really the big question. Of course, what happens on the GOP side, who knows?
9 candidates, 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, couple independents.
Wild West.
Wild West.
You've got the local Republican Party, the local Democratic Party, and then the national. Talking about Charlie Baker. Charlie Baker, a very capable guy, very charming guy too, very capable. He'd probably be a great president. I'd probably like to vote for him for president, but he could never get nominated at a Republican National Convention because of the nature of the national party. It will never happen.
If Jim Murphy was running that campaign, Jim Murphy
Well,
just
he
got
might be able to pull it off.
helped get Donald Trump elected. Jim Murphy, can you get Charlie Baker elected president of the United States?
Well, I'll say this. Here's what I would do if I could wave a magic wand. I would open up the primaries. I think that's, we started earlier talking about how the fringes, I think a good thing for America and for democracy would be to not have closed primaries.
Let people move from one party
Yeah,
to
I
the
think it
other
would
as they are
encourage more people to
motivated.
vote, and I think it would, not, it's fair is fair. I think that's one way that the Charlie Bakers of the world could, because it's a highly, believe me, when you sit there and you try and get, enough votes to win a nomination at a convention, which I was in Cleveland each state is different. They're bound on the first ballot, they're bound on the second ballot. A lot of the delegates are selected at conventions, and they're Ted Cruz supporters, but Trump won the primary, so they got to vote for Trump. I mean, it's a really sort of,
And then on the Democratic side, you've
they
got
had the super delegates, which I think they're getting rid of.
Well, after the Hillary disaster, right, the superdelegates, even that came out of reform. It's like there's a line from a Cole Porter song, goes something like, make reformers reform, reform.
I've done 4 national conventions now, and I'll just tell you, it's a very complicated, you know, it's a very complicated process, and it's state by state. And I think if you just sort of opened it up a little bit more, and had it be more, you know, primaries where, you know, both
better
Republicans
people,
and
better
Democrats
candidates.
would probably not want independents coming into their primaries. But I think if you were going to improve maybe, you know, this divisiveness, I think you would find voters generally being more satisfied with the choices they ended up with than maybe they were in other elections.
I
So
think
if I
that's
could do
right.
one thing, that's
You'd get better
one thing I would
candidates.
do.
You'd probably get better candidates, especially for the executive positions, you know, governor.
Mike Sheen, you launched successfully bagels at Dunkin' Donuts under your tutelage.
Well, a little bit before, but right around then, sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And a number of other brands and products.
sure.
Could you take a Charlie Baker and make him a successful
If you-
Republican
if you
brand?
if you take out the Republican hurdles, like the party hurdles, I think it'd be very easy to sell, because you pull for him. He's successful because people pull for Charlie. They want him to succeed.
And he'll sell in Mississippi and Arkansas and
I think he would have that broad appeal.
He's got great emotional
yeah.
intelligence.
Yeah.
And,
And he's not a wise guy. He's not he listens, and I think his success is, you know, a lot of politicians, the people who weren't polling for Hillary Clinton and weren't polling for Trump was staggering. And if you know, to sell a product, people have to be pulling for it. People have to want it to succeed, and I think he has what it takes to. He's genuine and he's humble. He's not.
The New York Times writes these roundups of who are the Democrats to watch in 2020. Gina Raimondo makes that list almost every time. Is that viable? Is Gina Raimondo a potential? If she has a reelected to a second term and she's successful, is she a viable presidential candidate?
vice presidential.
She's a vice presidential
Well,
candidate.
we've talked about this.
From because she can deliver all 4.
That's
we
it.
might be down to
That's
3
right.
by
And
then, but
free-
all 4 electoral votes.
That's right, and free drinks on Wayland Square.
Free drinks in Wayland Square.
We've talked ad nauseum about how her national PR machine does such a kind of incredible job. She gets the good placements. She's sort of positioned that way. And there's the juxtaposition between the PR and what takes place here and her approval ratings here. So you got to wonder, you know, does her team say, well, we don't need Rhode Island on the national stage. We can just sell the picture of pension reform, the economic gains that she's touting as she runs for governor right now. And yes, you'll have Rhode Islanders squawking to Kingdom Come to say it's not all puppy dogs and ice cream here. But in the end of the day, it's again just Rhode Island.
I've only met her personally. I don't live in Rhode Island, so I haven't seen much of her on television. I've met her personally a number of times, and she's very engaging, very smart. You know, she's interesting, and if the obstacle is that she's not good on TV, that can be fixed.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be
To a point.
Yeah, but you can be coached, and I think she could actually, because she's financially smart, she's engaging, and that can be fixed.
Jim Murphy, have you seen this phenomenon? I think we've seen it before around the country. Person loses popularity in their home state and tries to. Al Gore lost Tennessee.
Great example.
You know, I think for the Democrats this time around, it's going to be what it was for the Republicans. I think it's wide open. And I think any sitting governor, senator, I mean, that's why I think there'll be a lot of people who already are and will test the waters. I think it's, you know, it's frustrating as a strategist because in the end, there's a little bit of luck here. You know, there'll be a threshold thing, but who drops out, or whose wife gets sick and you drop out, or the kid, you know, it's the way.
And fundraising.
And fundraising, but that's dictated too, you know, so, you know, and some people pick you know, and the media expectations matter, you know, so I think that for any number of these candidates, I don't think any one of them, if they sat there and said to me, here's my path to victory, I would say, what are you talking about? You know, just go out, go to Iowa, go to New Hampshire, go to South Carolina, and hope lightning strikes. Because, you know, you're just going to have to, I think what's important is, I think voters want authenticity, number one, and I think you have to believe in something, and I would just go out there and say it. And things will, you know, I think that will come through. And the other thing I remember was, I always remember this, I wasn't there, but Bill Lacey, who worked with me and Bob Dole, he was Reagan's political director. He said Reagan had a story. And he said there were these two guys out at a campsite, and they were sitting by the fire, and they heard some rustling in the bushes, and oh my God, those was a bear. And so one guy started putting on his sneakers, and the other guy said, what are you, nuts? You'll never outrun that bear. He says, I'm not worried about outrunning the bear, I'm just worried about outrunning you. And, you know, campaigns are not elegant. They're not pretty. They don't have to be perfect. You just have to do better than the other person. So you know, when you were talking about all these candidates have lower ratings, somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to get more votes than the other person.
Things can change.
And I think there's just been a fundamental recalibration and realignment over because that's why Charlie Baker's such an anomaly, because in this macro environment where everybody hates all politicians and they're all liars and they're all thieves and we're all scared and nobody's doing anything, I think the new norm, I don't think, you know, in the old days, if you had a 2-to-1 favorable, unfavorable ratio, that was kind of, you know, that was 120/80 blood pressure, right? Now, you know, 2-to-1 favorable, unfavorables are just not the norm. So I think you're going to have, you know, less popular people in the end being nominated just because people are sick with the whole thing. But all you got to do is beat the other person. So I think that was a good story to remember, that nobody has to run a perfect campaign to win. They just have to run a campaign that's better.
Going to be looking for more, I'm talking about the presidential level, but I'd say some of the governorships and Congress too, more stable people. I think these things that, you know, we've had the flamboyance in various ways. And I think the next president is going to have a reputation for being rather calm and collected. I think there's going to be a
Milk
drive
toast.
for that. Well, not quite.
Run on
like
the milk
that.
toast
No,
platform?
No, they can't. You can't be milk toast and run for president. You have to be. Also, we should remember, to run for president, you have to be a little crazy. It's just insane.
I'm going to.
But a week is the old cliche from Harold Wilson, a week is an eternity in politics. And there's so many things that come into play. We all remember when George H.W. Bush had 90% approval rating, then he gets beaten by the governor of Arkansas with a checkered past. So these things change very fast. The important thing in the midterms to me, unless Mueller, you know, has the clear goods on Trump, is the economy. If the economy is still, you know, 4% unemployment, I think the Republicans do quite well. They may actually hang on to the House. It's this perception of how things are. The wallet is the most important organ for most Americans. And but if the economy starts sliding dramatically between now and next November, it would just be catastrophic for the Republicans, because the economy, which has been pushing. Now, I remind everybody the unemployment rate is, you know, 3.2% in Holland and, you know, 3.9% in Germany. This is all over the world, but of course people don't think of that. But watch the economy, and that, when I covered Watergate, Nixon's poll numbers really started to plunge when the economy plunged in '73. Remember that? You know, they're okay, you know, for quite a long while. Then we had the Arab oil embargo, we had this very deep recession in the mid '70s. And that's when his poll numbers really tanked.
Let me use that as a pivot point to talk about the last section, which is really the role of the media. What's the media doing? We've talked about trust. We've talked